I want every contraction, every rep, I want the contraction to be so meaningful. Every time you bring up that leg extension and you get to the top, I want you to flex like you're posing on stage. And then I want you to hold it. If you're going to go down the bodybuilding path, you had better know how to flex and hold a pose. There's static contractions.
Well, the training is super interesting, man, because, I mean, you're doing so little frequency. And there's multiple ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes. And like I said, you look great on stage. You've built a ton of muscle. So whatever you're doing has definitely worked for you. I think people get so hung up on the best training split, the ideal rep and set scheme, that they just become paralyzed and don't do anything,
right,
or don't do anything with any degree of intensity that creates enough stimuli to elicit growth. And I feel like people just need to freaking go hard. Obviously, lift with good form and technique and minimize risk of injury. But yeah, I mean, this is interesting because you and I train very differently, yet you and I both have built physiques via the method that we use for training. So there is not a right or wrong way to train per se. The important thing is that you train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think my question to anybody would be, are you able to logically ask yourself, what turns on the growth mechanism? Is it the number of sets? Is it the number of reps? Or is it the intensity? And that's where, when you start to peel this back, and if you were to imagine you're doing one set of bicep curls, that's 10 reps, and you're gonna train to failure. Whereas then that 10th last impossible rep is the rep that you're gritting your teeth and your legs are shaking. And maybe that's not even the 10th rep. Maybe it's the 15th rep. I don't care. But it's that last rep. Which rep of the set is the most productive to stimulate growth? The first rep, the second rep, or that last impossible rep?
I always like training to failure. So I would say that last rep. And I would go and say it's not even so much what it's doing from a biological standpoint, which obviously it is having an impact there, but what it's doing psychologically by pushing yourself that far. Like, the growth from that exponentially exceeds the growth you get from any of those prior reps.
100%. And, okay, I'm so glad you used the word psychologically. There's a new study that just came out about dementia, and I'm thinking amnesia. It's like I'm having amnesia. What's the other word? Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's?
Yeah. But dementia and Alzheimer's is basically the calcification of, the calcification of our neurons. And so the whole idea is, how do we decalcify the brain? Because that just happens over time. Is the lack of stimulation of the nervous system, right? Have you ever looked at the nervous system? Like if you Google image of nervous system, have you ever seen what that looks like? Dude, alien stuff.
Did you know that Alzheimer's and dementia is pretty much being coined as type 3 diabetes, because it's more so the glycation, not so the calcification?
Oh.
That's another good reason to eat a diet from a longevity standpoint.
Okay, so I did not know that. So the glycation, type 3 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? Okay, I guess maybe I'm curious now. Now you got me interested. Go down that rabbit hole, as we say, for just a minute.
So you look at like type 2 diabetics that are having their toes amputated or they're losing their eyesight. Basically, that's a result of glycation in those capillary vessels from excessive sugar, insulin resistance, because of all that sugar that they've been consuming that's in circulation. That same thing is happening neurologically in the brain. That's why they're calling it type 3 diabetes.
Okay. And can you help me understand what is glycation versus calcification?
Glycation, like calcification, is typically thought of in terms of like, calcium, like bone structure, like
Right.
it's overgrowth of that, calcium from like the bone tissue. Glycation is more like sugar, glucose. So that glycation, like glucose, is sticky and it's sticking
Mm,
together in overabundance.
plaque. Yeah.
Kinda.
Okay, because they talk about the sticky. I've heard that the stickiness of that happens in the brain. With the,
Hmm. So like when you're looking at people that are very prevalent with Alzheimer's dementia, they oftentimes have a pretty high degree of insulin resistance as well. Not always, but
mm,
oftentimes that's the case. And if they improve their nutrition, leaned more into fat metabolism, weren't
right.
so dependent upon glucose, weren't so addicted to glucose. Like you look at patients that have Alzheimer's dementia that are put on a therapeutic ketogenic diet, and their signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's dementia is drastically diminished.
One of the podcasts that you did the other day was the gentleman who had he was in the military and he was having the chronic episodes of what do you call it um, uh, epilepsy,
Hmm.
the epileptic situations, and him getting onto the ketogenic diet that turned that off.
Well, that's what the ketogenic diet was originally used for. It was used in the 1920s for children that were having epileptic seizures, and then they kind of phased it out as a preventative measure for that once they started making drugs that targeted that pathway. But some people were resistant to those drugs, so they continued to, leverage a ketogenic diet. But yeah, I mean, like that's where it was originally used in a medical setting.
Okay. And I guess this is why this is so important because I mean, because do you see, this is, I mean, can I just bring this all back to the very first thing we talked about? How you cannot compartmentalize anything. Look how everything that we're talking about touches everything.
Hmm.
We went from talking about how beautiful women are to Lakota Sioux to keto bricks to help me understand glycation and calcification to Mike Menser to the Holy Spirit. Like all this stuff is so connected. And while I do like to compartmentalize and go down these rabbit holes, man, it's really difficult because you realize that revelation that you received is so it's so foundational. If you don't get that right, everything else spins out of control eventually. Everything spins out of control. So if you don't think about your, and really glad we talked about the joints thing and that buff dudes guy, because your joints and your muscle structure and all that stuff now have this cascading effect on all this. And the myth about carbohydrates being the only fuel source, and it's crazy. This is in the American diet, like and that's what unfortunately Mike Menser did say, that he basically surrendered to the balanced American diet, saying, listen, it's all agreed upon by the top nutritions, 60% carbohydrates, 30% protein, and what, 20% fats.
Yeah, but so like, man, I could take it down a freaking rabbit hole right now. We're already going long, so I won't. But I mean, like, look into the money trail. All right.
Right.
Where does the money come from? Who is at stake to win or lose? Do you know the story of like Kellogg's cereal? Have you ever heard that story?
No.
Okay. Do some homework, man. Look
Okay.
up, type in Kellogg's cereal and Seventh day Adventist masturbation.
Well, oh, wow. Okay,
Okay.
I can. Oh, what? Jeez.
It's just like total crazy random stuff that people don't think of when they're going to the grocery store buying Fruit Loops. But like, follow the money, man. It makes everything much more clear.
Oh my gosh. Well, so, so I gotta, I gotta at least cinch up this one thing about this glycification. What was it?
Glycation.
Glycation. And of the brain, because that's what happens in that last impossible rep is psychologically it stimulates the entire nervous system. It's no longer about the biceps anymore because that last impossible rep, I know I'm getting so excited because I'm so passionate about it. That last impossible rep, your entire body is shaking. Have you ever done it, like we're going to train together sometime. But that last impossible rep on a bicep curl when you're holding that straight bar to failure, dude, it's impossible to even hold it.
Yeah. And you get goosebumps. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you're going like all out, like when I put the bar down,
Mm-hmm.
like I've got goosebumps all over. Like start seeing, spots. Like,
Stars.
yeah.
Yeah. And like my whole body, like I feel it in my calves. My calves, like my biceps are saying, guys, I'm giving out. I need the quads. I need the butt. I need the calves. I need the fingers. I need the brain. I need the shoulders. I need everything. Everybody, get your ass on board. Apparently, Chavanaugh's doing one more rep. It's crazy town here. And then you can't even do that. So you sling it up there with momentum. You just get it up there. Somehow get it up. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. There's still little gas in the tank on the eccentric. Well, son of a gun. Guess what we're doing again, boys and girls? we're gonna messy sling or trainer help me get that up. And we're gonna go into negative town training.
Yeah. And see, I love doing negatives, love doing drop sets, supersets, force reps, all that good stuff. There's probably a point at which some of that could have a point of diminishing returns with regards to joint structure, health, and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's going to look a little bit different for everybody. That's
Yes,
why
100%.
because I know some of the crazy stuff I've done in intensity techniques that would probably not be smart for me to do when I'm 77 years old,
Right. Oh, and especially if you've never gone to
Right.
if you've never gone to that place, because going to that place is no joke. Like I never get used to. I was texting Lace last night, my wife, before the training, and I was like, babe, this is I am like freaked out. She's like, why? Like this never gets easy. I have anxiety. I'm nervous. I know what I'm about to do. And I'm freaked out because when you take it to high intensity land, once a week, like I do, you do go to that place. But that's I guess the takeaway on the central nervous system in the brain that I wanted to touch on is
What's cool though, all right, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, go.
So, like, one thing that I've been really practicing here lately with my training is like I'll know what my sets and reps and weight are when I'm going to that place.
Uh-huh.
And then my goal becomes, okay, let me hit that same weight set rep count or more, but then do so in a constant state of zen, where I'm just like in a freaking state of meditation and I'm listening to opera music or no music at all. Like when
Amen.
I can go there and then harness whatever I need to physiologically to replicate that without having to go there to the extreme dark place. Like that's kind of my goal with all my training now.
Right. Yeah, and I think that discipline, see what that is that's awareness and focus. And I was talking to my son just a minute ago. I was encouraging him because he was training. They're going to train legs tonight, and I was like, Liam, I don't want you to get caught up in the reps. I want every contraction, every rep, I want the contraction to be so meaningful. Every time you bring up that leg extension and you get to the top, I want you to flex like you're posing on stage. I want you to flex those quadriceps as if you're holding a pose where you're showing all the details of every part of your legs. And then I want you to hold it. I want you to hold it because you know what? If you're going to go down the bodybuilding path, you had better know how to flex and hold a pose for not a rep. What do we think? We're out there repping poses? They're static contractions. I mean, long static contractions, like 8-9 seconds, maybe, You know, if you're in the relaxed front pose, dude, 30 seconds, a minute.
When I did Worlds in 2023, there was 38 people in our class, and I was on stage for 57 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you stay in that composure of static contraction
The entire time?
Good job. Good job. I was disgusted when I was watching the Olympia just, this last week. When they were giving out the medals and everything. I mean, the Olympia was great, and Derek very deserving. Hottie, love Hottie. But when they were doing all the awards and everything, of course, I'm looking at it from a different lens, having from just done your show, and I'm like, why are these guys not in the front relaxed? I mean, they're like standing around, like scratching their balls. Like it's gross.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always taken the approach if I'm on stage, I'm being judged. Even if I'm not actively being judged on paper, it's like I want to present myself as a professional at all times.
Go back and look at the 90s. In all the Olympias, every single one of them stayed. Even Dory, I love it. Even at the final moment where they're about to be given the award, they're in that front relaxed pose, which is it looks to the world, like they're not posing, but that is how I believe bodybuilding needs to be. The integrity of bodybuilding needs to be maintained is by being able to pose.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Savage Clip. If you want to see the full-blown deep dive, check out the full episode here, and I'll see you there.